Welcome back to Real Life Answers. My name is Ben, and this is Jesus on Culture. Welcome to Jesus on Culture, where we take one of today's top cultural issues and discuss it in a series. This series involves two pastors, Dan Bannister, pastor of Grace Alive Church in Ontario, California, and Bob Bannister, pastor of First Baptist Church Springfield, Louisiana. We'll be discussing issues such as, should Christians be involved in social justice? Is racism a sin? What is white privilege? Does it actually exist? God bless you, have a great day, and here is Jesus on Culture.
Reading stamps from the beginning, I am concerned about the church's historical complicity with the slave trade and the resulting racism. Is there a good read for the Christian response to this? Dan, I'm going to let you answer that.
Okay, so there are a number of different authors. The problem is that it's disturbing. It is disturbing. The reality of history is disturbing. Was the church complicit?
I'm not saying it was all lies, but they slanted it quite a bit.
So, Pastor Robert, help me understand that. So to be sure I'm answering the question correctly, the question is there a good read to understanding, to looking at the complicity in church history with slavery? Is that
complicity is lack of action? Am I correct?
Yeah, well, they allowed it. Yeah, they and went along with. So to be complicit with something is that they're going along with it.
And Jody, I might add, this is one of the reasons that I got vocal regarding social justice is when you look back in history over this issue, the only vocal ministers, and this, it burns me up on the inside, were the ones that were teaching black men were inferior. And I was not going to be guilty of being silent. That's one of the things that got me into this. God told me, he said, the reason this is still perpetuating is ministers haven't dealt with it. And he said, if you deal with it, it'll help. You talk about it, it'll help. He's like, you'll make mistakes, you'll say dumb things, but if you start the conversation, good stuff will take place. So what is a good read then, Dan, for someone to look over the complicity from an objective standpoint? I'm guessing is what she's wanting to find, and the resulting racism coming from that complicity. Is there a good read for the Christian response to this?
So, John Perkins is an author who is someone that I would say it's a good idea to read some of his stuff. Looking at, if you want good response for the church's, a good read for the church's response, again, I'm going to underline this book. That's what DA is aiming at, is helping us to come to a response as people of God. Specifically looking at the complicity of the church with slavery. Our history, as the culture's history, is one of complicity. We go back 400 years. You can go back further than that in Europe. You see that the church was very silent. Martin Luther King, when he was involved in the civil rights movement, and this is obviously beyond slavery, but Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement was told by other pastors that, hey, this is something that does need to be addressed, but it's not the right time. It's not the right time. Sit down. And in fact, that's why King wrote, when he wrote the letters from a Birmingham jail, that's what he is addressing, is the complicity of the church, the silence. And King at one point actually says that at the end of it all, what we will remember won't be the actions of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And the church overwhelmingly during the time of slavery remained silent about what was going on and just participated in the culture rather than confronting it. And honestly, that's the problem that we have still today, is churches participating in culture and allowing culture to lead where we're going as a church rather than the church leading out. And so we've got to get to a point where we are speaking up, where we're driving the conversation back to the scripture, back to what the Bible teaches.
We have the ultimate truth. We have the ultimate ability to give somebody the gospel, which will set them free. We have the ultimate drive factor in the conversation. We have the single greatest act of justice in Jesus Christ, and we're not starting the conversation. We need to be. You're right.
Matt Chandler, who's a pastor of the Village Church, actually made a video just a few weeks back. And one of the things that he points out is, he said, people are all upset over Black Lives Matter and the organization of Black Lives Matter. And Matt makes the point that the statement and the movement are separate from the organization and need to be viewed as separate. And I would absolutely 100% agree with that statement. But he goes on to say, you don't like you don't like that there's a secular organization that's driving this conversation. He said, and he ultimately, and I'm paraphrasing here, he basically says, neither do I. This is the birthright of the church. This is the birthright of the church. The church should have been standing up for justice for the Black community, and we have not. That has been the sin of the church, that we have not spoken up. We have not stood up when we should have. And just like we see throughout Scripture, God sometimes, so Habakkuk is a book of the Bible that I'll reference at this point. Habakkuk cries out to God and says, God, what about all this injustice in our land? And God says, I'm bringing in the Babylonians to punish my people because of their injustice. And to which Habakkuk says, wait a minute, God, they're worse than we are. And ultimately, God points to a future when God will ultimately do away with all evil and all injustice. But at this time, he's using this pagan people to bring about justice on his people because his people were acting unjustly. Now, here's the reality. Sometimes God raises up secular organizations to fill a gap where the church is not moving. And we shouldn't be surprised when people who are not Christians, who are not Christ followers, do things that don't reflect following Christ. And so and I want to be very clear, I do not align with the Black Lives Matter organization. I think that there are some of the things that they stand for that are very unhelpful and that ultimately, as a Christian, I can't support. But I have no apology and have no shame in making the statement that Black Lives Matter, because the statement Black Lives Matter is a statement that is backed up and set in a biblical doctrine of the image of God, the fact that every Black woman, man, boy, and girl is created in the image of God, and that every person is loved by God, and that Jesus died to show the value and worth of every single individual. And so it shouldn't be something that the church should draw away from or shy away from to say that Black Lives Matter. In fact, it ought to be something that we were saying first.
Correct.
So I get wound up on that.
Well,
So what did you think? Is there anything you'd like to add to what was said today? If so, please let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like what you saw today, please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss an episode. Finally, please join us every Monday at 4 p.m. for new issues regarding our culture.